Yeah, I think we can go ahead and get started. Before I introduce our speakers, I do want to thank our sponsor this morning is Paylocity. They've filmed a little video about Paylocity and what they do. So I'm going to play that. It's only 5 minutes long, but I'll share that with you all. Just go ahead and watch it. And again, I'll send out some follow-up materials. And then we'll go right into our session.
Hi, Delaware SHRM. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. I'm Christine Brannigan, and I am a human capital management consultant for Paylocity. I have been in the human resource and payroll world for over 10 years now. My first gig was with a CPA who didn't believe in computers, so I got to learn payroll the old-fashioned way, ripping those good old green layer sheets off that pad and doing it with a calculator and a pencil. From there, I went to work with one of the bigger payroll companies. And as I was working for them for 7 years, I realized that there is such a significant compromise that companies are making when it comes to the way that they're doing their HR and payroll. Significant compromise. What I'm talking about are the two ways that I would see people doing their payroll and HR. They would either have a software company like a QuickBooks or a Jonas or a Great Plains, and it would do everything they needed it to do, but you would be in charge of the one making sure that you would stay in compliance. So if you didn't want to be in charge of compliance anymore, then you would go and you would outsource. And you would outsource and you'd be stuck in this little box. Information gets in, but no information gets out. And there's no way to pull in anything else from anyone where to make it work the way you need it to work. Because payroll just isn't payroll anymore, right? So with Paylocity, I like to say we're giving you a true hybrid. We're giving you the best of both worlds here. We build and use all of our own software. All of our coders and all of our help desk, they are all located in the United States. Do you know who processes my payroll? Paylocity. Check to see who does yours. And we're also a technology company. And because we're a technology company, we invest 13 to 15% of our R&D credits back into our technology every year to make enhancements. We're not going to put you on version 15.7 and flip the script every day. We're going to make it better for you. And then service. We have a 97% retention rate, and that's because of our unique service model. You get a dedicated rep as well as a team behind them to make sure there's always someone there to answer your call. 85% of the time, your issue is resolved on that first call, and it is a 30-second wait time. We also have a live chat and self-help library if you don't feel like picking up the phone. And of course, we will keep you in compliance with everything A to Z when it comes to payroll. And I'm even talking about those pesky Pennsylvania PSD codes. I've always heard the saying throughout my career, yeah, we'll compare apples to apples, or we'll compare apples to oranges. But really, Paylocity is what I like to say is an orange. We're giving you a homegrown system that we build from the ground up for every single one of our customers to make sure it works the way that you need it to work. And we are a single platform that is also open, meaning that we will integrate with your 401k that your financial advisor picked for you. We will integrate with your benefits from your trusted broker. And the only thing that Paylocity does is HR and payroll. 2020 and 2021. 2 historic years. And within those 2 historic years, there's been 2 phrases that I've heard. Unprecedented times and diversity and inclusion. The second one, the reason why you're all here today. So not only did Paylocity step up and was the first HCM company to produce the PPP loans, we're also the first HCM company to put some great tools in place to help your organization with diversity and inclusion. Paylocity is here to help individuals like yourself navigate the forever changing times. Dare I say, unprecedented Definitely in the world of HR, you guys don't get the credit you deserved. Paylocity stepped up and we created a dashboard where your employees are able to fill in all the pertinent information to their self-identity. Another great thing that Paylocity does, we're going to give you a free course in our compliance dashboard to send out to all your employees about diversity and inclusion. I mean, it's why we're all here today, right? I'm very excited to speak with some of you that are viewing this call today. My information will be provided, and I look forward to helping streamline your operations while also keeping you compliant.
Awesome. Well, thank you to Paylocity again for sponsoring this event and making it possible. Now I will turn it over to Kevin and Keith of Disability Solutions. Sorry about that. Disability Solutions is the name of their organization. Kevin is calling in from Connecticut this morning. Keith is in Indianapolis. So we're delighted to have them on. Again, Kevin is the Senior Consultant and Director of Partnership Development for Disability Solutions, and Keith Meadows is the Hiring and Engagement Consultant with them as well. So they'll show more about what their organization does. And then Diane Campanelli, our wonderful program chair for Delaware SHRM, will jump on, and she is also the Senior HR Consultant of Thrive Real Life Independence, which we'll share more details about as well. So Kevin, I will turn it over to you.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you all for having us today. We're very excited. We are a consulting firm that helps employers with their overall mission to recruit and hire talent with all types of disabilities. I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera off now because I can't stand watching myself talk as I go through my presentations. But we'll have, if you want to ask a question throughout the presentation, you can use that chat bar or the Q&A button, and we'll be happy to answer some of those questions throughout. Or you can hold them to the end, and we can have a little discussion at the end. We love any questions, a good question, so feel free to ask away. All right. So again, my name is Kevin McCluskey. I am the Senior Consultant, Director of Partnership Development. And on my right-hand side, you got Keith Meadows. He's a hiring engagement consultant. And although we have different titles, we pretty much do the same work. And that is we help our employers all across the country, again, find some really great talent for their business. And that talent so happens to have a disability. I've been working with Pepsi Beverages for the last 8 years on their Pepsi Act projects, where we help them hire roughly about 2,200 individuals with disabilities into their facilities all across the country. Keith works with Pepsi as well, and he works with Bank of America, Synchrony, and some other clients across the country as well. Our motto here at Disability Solutions is changing minds and changing lives. We like to change the minds of employers, and we do that through education such as this. We do it through proven methods, which end up in really, really positive results. Again, our mission really is to put together a successful initiative. We just don't want to check the box and be compliant. We really want to get you some great talent. Again, that talent so happens to have a disability. So today is a presentation called Dispelling Fear and Stigma. So when we talk to a lot of employers, there's a lot of fear around going out and recruiting and hiring people with disabilities. So we want to kind of break down some of those barriers, kill some of those myths and stigmas to really help you understand why it's important, you know, not just compliance wise, but why it's really going to help your business when you go out there and start recruiting and hiring people with disabilities. So again, today we hope you get a greater understanding of the disability community in general and the strength of this typically untapped talent resource, and really awareness of all the disabilities and abilities out there. We'll talk about some actual outcomes and business solutions and best practices through some of these case studies that we'll talk about. Also an opportunity, like I said, any questions, a good question. So please go ahead, ask any of those questions that you might have about fears and the misconceptions around people with disabilities. You'll gain an understanding of the importance of culture and how people with disabilities fit into that. And finally, we hope today you'll leave with a clear understanding of why recruiting and hiring people with disabilities is really smart for your business. And more importantly, we want to increase your level of comfort on how to engage, lead, and mentor individuals with disabilities in your workplace. All right, so we have we work with many of employers all across the country. We work with about over 40 right now, employers all across the US and into Canada, actually. And what we do is we have a career center where we are pulling these jobs from your career sites throughout the day. So these are live competitive roles, all the way from warehouse roles to C-suite. And we help with the, excuse me, a little early for me. We help with the outreach to community-based organizations all across the country. We have about 8,000 talent partners that work with talent with disabilities. And we get the word out for our jobs to with our employers all across the country to these 8,000 partners. And those partners refer some really great talent to our employers. And again, we continue to see great results in hiring talent with disabilities, and they are also staying on those jobs. So I'm going to turn it over to Keith Meadows. He's going to tell us what is a disability.
Thank you, Kevin, and thanks everybody for joining today. If you ask people at your business to define the word disability, what would they say? And what would you say even? If you're like a lot of us, maybe you think of those initially with visible physical disabilities, maybe somebody missing an arm or a leg, or maybe that person in a wheelchair pops into mind. When in fact, actually, of all the disabilities out there, 70% of them are hidden, and the actual definition of disability is very broad. We've got conditions such as ADD, ADHD, diabetes, PTSD, generalized anxiety. Those are all considered disabilities, although most people don't think that they are. And we're actually going to walk you through a couple of different slides that touch on the word disability from a few different sources, just to show you how broad that definition can actually be. First on the docket today, we have the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA, which many of you are familiar with, I'm sure. And it actually defines disability as a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. And the key phrase we want you to keep in mind there is physical or mental. And now on your screen is another slide on disability that actually goes and mentions some of those hidden disabilities that I dropped just a bit earlier. Now, certainly disability does include those you can see, right? But we really want to expand your thinking beyond that visible disability thought process that a lot of us get stuck in when we think of disability. And just to highlight that, we've got a few people that you may recognize on the right-hand side of your screen. And we'll move clockwise, starting with the lower left there. So that's actor Tom Cruise, who actually has overcame dyslexia, a learning disability. Julia Louis-Dreyfus of Seinfeld and Veep fame, who is a cancer survivor. Next, everybody recognizes that face, right? That's Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who has actually spoken very publicly in the last couple of years about his battles with depression. And in the lower right is a photo of me from a JCPenney studio. I have virtually nothing in common with these people, but what we do share is we have hidden disabilities. I've struggled with severe asthma my whole life, and if you met me, you probably wouldn't be able to tell that unless you started challenging me to sprints or races or began chasing me for some reason. And, these are disabilities that you don't really think about, those that we can't see readily. I'm going to pass you back to Kevin. He's going to help you out with the right terminology to use when we talk about disability.
Thank you, Keith. So like I said, our motto is changing minds and changing lives. So we do a lot of education. And where we really start is, a question we typically get is, how do we address a person with a disability? Now, this knowledge is something you can take on right now, and you can kind of make a difference in your world. As you'll hear throughout this presentation, we prefer to use what's called person-first language. And we definitely want to realize that everyone is different in their choices and opinions and likes. But again, we choose using person-first language with really an emphasis on really deleting some of these terms from your vocabulary. So don't be worried if you still say some of these terms. It does take time to break these old habits. So we often hear the disabled, the handicapped, the cringeworthy R word still, differently abled, special people, challenged people, crippled people. All these words we believe have a negative label associated with them, especially when it comes to employment. When you say there's a car on the side of the highway that's disabled really means that car doesn't work and it's not functioning properly. That's why we try to avoid calling people disabled. And really why we choose putting the person first, or honestly keeping the disability off altogether. You know, I don't call Keith with asthma or Keith with a disability. I just call him Keith, my coworker. And companies are definitely taking notice as well. If you're familiar with baseball, in 2019, they actually changed the disabled list to the injured list. And they made that change out of concern that the term disabled for injured players really falsely compared disabilities with injuries and the inability to actually participate in sports. Again, a real small educational piece to get employers and people not only thinking differently, but talking differently as well. And this is an education impact and change you can actually make right now. All right, so again, we talk a lot about myths and stigmas, and we want to start with some of these typical ones that we have around people with disabilities. And some of the words on the left side of the screen, they may seem like examples of the past, but here, unfortunately, in 2021, we still hear some of these fears and stigmas when we're talking, you know, to people outside the workplace, and we actually still hear it when talking to potential clients of ours. Our main job is to debunk these thoughts and concerns, again, through education and the results we're seeing with our employer clients. When we start working with employers, we often hear, you know, people with disabilities can't do our jobs, or we don't hire people with disabilities. Crazy that we still hear stuff like that. It's really true. And I always say, think about if you put another diversity group in that sentence. You know, we don't hire women. Women couldn't do our jobs. For some reason, employers are still comfortable saying that to us, which is really, it's tough and it's interesting. And I can guarantee you that, you know, whatever open positions you have right now, the right person with a disability can do each and every one of them. Disability Solutions has helped hire anyone from the mailroom to the boardroom. You know, we're talking about warehouse workers, department managers, scientists, engineers, all the above, all with disabilities. So we have Chris Rock on your screen right here. He has a nonverbal disorder. He came out with it recently, and he just basically isn't able to pick up on a lot of social cues. So again, you know, he probably wouldn't be a great salesman or something, some other field like that, some customer related service job. But he ended up finding a really good career as a comedian, actor, producer. So again, it's really finding the right talent for the right job. And just because they have a disability doesn't mean they're not going to be a good fit for some type of role that you might have. So some things we want to keep in mind is, you know, not every person with a disability uses a wheelchair, or someone with wheelchair, or someone with autism. There's tons and tons of different disabilities out there. As Keith just mentioned, 70% of the disabilities are invisible. Another thing we want to keep in mind is, you know, in the news in Hollywood, mental health has been kind of really taken as, you know, people with mental health are dangerous, and, you know, they do violent acts, which is not true. It's a very small, tiny single-digit percentage of people with mental health who actually do things like that. So, you know, these ones on the left hand that I just talked about, and the ones on your screen, they help perpetuate some of those awful stereotypes around people with disabilities, especially when it comes to employment. So again, today we just want to challenge your thinking, kind of change your thinking a little bit. And you do have the power, not as just people, but employers actually to break these myths and stigmas and share this information as well. All right, so we like to talk a little bit about opportunity within employment of people with disabilities. As of 2018, roughly 1 in 4 Americans have some type of disability, which makes people with disabilities the largest talent group in the United States. Think about that for a second. People with disabilities are the largest talent group in the United States. And not only are they the largest talent group, they are a very, very untapped pool of talent. There's not a lot of employers going out there and recruiting this pool of talent. As we all know, the unemployment rate, I had got it down pre-COVID because it's a little shaky since the last year or so. But there's one number that pretty much stays consistent, and that is the unemployment rate for individuals with disabilities is roughly double that of the unemployment rate with those without disabilities. Now, a few factors of that includes, again, some of those fears and stigmas that we just heard about that companies still have around recruiting and hiring people with disabilities. People with disabilities are often pigeonholed into the same entry-level positions, or they might just be offered part-time or short work jobs. They also face other barriers to employment, such as lack of transportation or lack of use to medical devices that they might need. One thing we've seen with COVID, it's a kind of a silver lining for what we do, is most of us ended up going home and working from home, and we got all these accommodations, and without asking for them, and we're able to work from home when people with disabilities were told, no, you can't do that job from home. Absolutely not. So the world changed, and all of a sudden, a lot of us are working from home still, and getting accommodations and getting extra screens and a Wi-Fi or something, a nice chair, something like that. So we're being accommodated to work from home. So it's a really good opportunity for people with disabilities who have some of those severe disabilities that have the talent, but just don't physically be able to get to the office. So it's a really good opportunity for us. So again, here at Disability Solutions, we work with employers to squash these fears and stigmas, and we want to look at the talent rather than just the disability. So some things we also heard around or happens with hiring people with disabilities is higher retention. So our clients have seen about a 14% higher retention rate than their clients' average retention rate. Again, we've worked with companies to really increase self-disclosures too. I know a lot of you are here for compliance, right? So it's really hard to get people with disabilities to check that box that they are a person with a disability, because they have that fear that it's going to be used against them. So when you're a company that really goes out and promotes recruiting and hiring people with disabilities, people are going to be more comfortable coming to your organization and selecting that box and not fear that they'll be judged for it. So it's another thing we do. We've seen a very huge, about 53% increase in self-disclosures across the country. With Pepsi alone, we saw about a 550% increase over 5 years in applications of people who selected they have a disability, and a 333% increase of hires people who have actually selected they have a disability. I'm going to talk about diversity within disability in a second, but again, we also, like I said earlier, we're hiring anyone. Again, the right person for the right job, entry level to management. All right, so diversity within disability, it's known that diverse hiring and recruiting, it's going to increase your productivity, it increases creativity, but it's also going to affect your employer's internal and external reputation. So employers are always looking for innovative ways to attract and hire from all these diverse populations. Well, I got a surprise for you. There is lots of diversity within disability. And we like to say that disabilities don't discriminate. Much like the veteran population out there, people with disabilities hit on all the diversity metrics, including Black, African-American, Hispanic, Asian, women, and veterans as well. Therefore, when you're hiring people with disabilities, you're also increasing all your diversity outreach and hiring metrics all across the board. Something really great to think about. All right, so let's focus on the market value real quick associated with hiring people with disabilities. As we all know now, 1 in 4 of Americans have some type of disability. So aside from that talent value, when you tap into this talent pool, you're also going to increase your business. It's also going to launch your company into a whole new market of customers. So if you look at the numbers on the right-hand side, about 20 million families out of 70 million families have at least one member of their family with a disability. Now that is a lot of potential customers out there. People with disabilities also account for spending power worth way over $645 billion. Studies show that 87% of individuals prefer to spend their money on companies that are hiring people with disabilities. Not sure what the other 13% prefer. But I promise you, people with disabilities and their family members are fiercely loyal with these purchasing dollars, and they consciously select products and services over the competitors. Again, I've been working with Pepsi for 8 years. I was a Coke drinker before. I am a huge Pepsi ambassador. We drink Tropicana orange juice in this house. My kids have Quaker Oats granola bars, Gatorade over Powerade, Aquafina water, you name it. We are very consciously selecting those products all the time, and we support brands that support our mission. And again, this spending power really does go to companies who foster inclusion, and the disability community is large, and they are certainly taking notice. Keith?
Thank you, Kevin. This is our rule them in rather than rule them out slide for people with disabilities. And usually it's been the opposite when it comes to recruiting and getting positions. And so we really want you to flip that script and think about, ruling them in first rather than excluding them. And what you can see with the first 3 bullet points here, those are sometimes what recruiters or folks who are, bringing people into the organization see when interviewing folks with disabilities. Maybe there's some gaps in employment. Maybe there's some part-time work, some contract work, some temporary work. In interviews, there might be slight delays to the questions that you ask. And these are traditionally all ways that candidates get, filtered out of the process, right? And so we want to open your mind a little bit beyond, what you traditionally would, when you're going through and analyzing candidates. And the remaining bullet points are all things that you can do to help that. And so the first is disability doesn't equal accommodation. And so a lot of folks, if they notice there's a disability or they hear disability, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to accommodate this person, and that's just too much work, right? Awful, disability equals accommodation. That's an awful thought process. So please help us break that. Also, know your accommodation process. A lot of people at companies all across the country have no idea what that process is, where to find it, and what to do. You can be that change after this webinar. You can find out what that is and where it is and what to do. Look beyond that first few minutes of the interview. That's statistically the worst part of the interview for most people, including people with disabilities. Don't fear disability and consider candidates with an open mind. Just a few points there to help you be more inclusive.
Keith.
So we're going to get in the meat of the presentation here and talk about different types of disabilities. We went through those definitions. We learned that definition is broad. It covers all different types of disabilities. Certain of those are generalized or stereotyped still to this day. But a key takeaway we want you to remember is that these are all unique individuals with different skill sets, no matter what that disability is. And for some reason, a lot of people get nervous around disabilities in general. That what do I say, or what should I not say, or how do I act? And really, the short answer is to act as you would normally, disability or not. We don't want you to feel, don't worry about feeling uncomfortable or making mistakes when you have good intentions. For example, it's still okay to use the words "see you later" to someone who's blind. Another very public example was, former President George W. Bush had a presidential concert when he was in office, and Stevie Wonder was the performer. And as the concert was about to begin, Stevie was walking towards George W. Bush, and he stood up and waved and smiled real big. And obviously Stevie didn't see that, right? But everybody else in the audience did. Our point is, it's okay to be uncomfortable and make mistakes. But we do want you to realize that for most people with disabilities, there are 2 things of utmost importance. And they're actually important to us all, but even more so for those with disabilities: independence and acceptance. So we want to live as independently as we possibly can. And we also want to be accepted by society, friends, family members, coworkers, strangers, for who we are. So next, we're going to walk you through some different types of disabilities here. We'll give you tips on etiquette and some do's and some don'ts. Another common thread through all of this is that there may be some fear on your part, either up front because of the specific type of disability or not knowing what to say or how to react. And we encourage you just to use these tips and also pretend that you're talking to a family member or a close friend, and that fear does disappear. Kevin?
All right, thank you, Keith. So when one thinks of disabilities, sometimes they often think of those visible disabilities right away, when we now know, right, only 30% of disabilities are actually visible. Another common misconception is that someone in a wheelchair represents most of this population. You see it on the parking signs and whatnot, but only 8% of people with disabilities actually utilize a wheelchair. So let's take a look at some of those visible physical disabilities. Common examples are someone who uses a wheelchair or arm braces or some other device for mobility. Other examples are people who are deaf or hard of hearing. Deafness refers to an inability to understand speech through hearing, even when the sound is amplified. Then you even have profound deafness, which means the person cannot hear anything at all, unable to detect any sound, even at the highest volume possible. So even within Specific disability, there's actually a lot of difference in that disability. So something also to think about. Another example we have on the screen is an amputee congenital birth defect, such as the football sensation Shaquem Griffin. He was actually born, if you look at his left hand there, he was born with an amniotic band syndrome, which affected his left hand and caused his fingers not to fully develop. And he's actually his college football team went undefeated, and he was drafted by the Seattle Seahawks. And I think he's actually on the practice squad right now. But again, a perfect example of someone using their disability as an ability. Now let's talk about etiquette for the physical visible disabilities. The first tip is that individual is using a wheelchair or really anything for mobility, such as crutches or let's say a walker. Really anything helping them with mobility. You want to make sure you do not touch that device, especially without asking. People with disabilities, consider these items a part of who they are. So when you come up and touch someone's wheelchair without asking, it's kind of if I went up to Keith and grabbed him by his shirt and started walking him around. I'll tell you a quick story here. My father-in-law has MS, and he's been in a wheelchair ever since I known him for 20 plus years now. And I used to go up to his where he lives, his facility of living, and we go up to his room, and I'd grab by the wheelchair and say, "Hey, Bill, we're going downstairs to see the kids and have some pizza." And I'd wheel him down the hall, into the elevator, down the elevator, into the room. And never once did I ever think to ask him if that's what he wanted to do. I just assumed, because that's what I was there to do. I was there to have pizza with him and my kids and my family. And then one day it kind of dawned on me, and I was, started to get into this field, and I realized that, I never asked him, one, if I can touch his wheelchair, two, if I could, that's where he wants to go. So one day I just asked him, "Hey, Bill, do you want to go downstairs and have pizza?" And to my surprise, he actually wanted to go to the cafeteria area where he could eat with his friends and share the joy of our family, my kids running around, and share that visit with his friends and family to kind of show off his family. He was excited to have his family there, and he wanted to do that. In our minds as his family, we just assumed he wanted to be in this area and be in this area, but he wanted to be somewhere else. So it's really just thinking about asking them. It's just to think about that for a second, and where that is as a person in a wheelchair, or what they want to do. Again, just we kind of assume sometimes. So as when you're talking to a person in a wheelchair, you also want to get down to their eye level. So if you see in that picture right there, this positioning shows some respect for that individual, and it really doesn't make them uncomfortable by looking up at you for a long time. I challenge you to kind of tilt your head for about 45 seconds and let me know how your neck feels. So again, pull up a chair, take a knee, whatever's easier for you, that works. And as with all disabilities, as I just kind of used in the example, you want to ask if they need help versus assuming that they need help. Our society really has conditioned us that people with disabilities need our help, and they need our charity. Therefore, sometimes we assume that person in a wheelchair, needs our assistance, maybe opening a door or crossing the street. So that person in a wheelchair may have spent years trying to get to that point where they can do that independently. Then when you come up behind them and just assume they need your help, kind of cheapens that progress a bit. So that's why when you notice someone who might possibly need some help, simply ask, and that gives them the opportunity to really accept or decline that help. And if you're a business, obviously COVID's changed some things here, but you want to make sure your business is accessible for people with physical disabilities. Make sure your wheelchair ramps are accessible, your automatic doors are working, your elevators are working. Keith and I travel all across the country, again, pre-COVID, and we'll see wonderful state-of-the-art facilities with all these wonderful ramps and accessibility. And there'll be storage boxes at the top of the ramp, so it's not really accessible for someone if they came in. So again, make sure if you're interviewing individuals, make sure your interview area is clear, and someone with a wheelchair can kind of come right in and be comfortable in an interview setting, rather than you getting up and moving your whole office around to make an uncomfortable process even more uncomfortable. And again, just look around your environment. Most buildings these days are built with these in mind. However, lots of these older buildings are definitely not 100% accessible. So just take a look around your office, do a little tour, and see how you can make it more accessible for people with physical disabilities and using those mobility devices. Keith.
Thank you, Kevin. So back in the good old days, I call it the good old days, when we, pre-COVID, when Kevin and I would deliver these in a live setting, we usually ask for a show of hands, and we'd ask a series of questions. And, there's about 40 people in this training, and we'd say, has anyone ever met someone who is completely blind? Or has anyone ever met someone who is completely deaf, or anyone with mental illness? And we'd cycle through maybe 3, 4, 5 different types of disabilities and ask for a show of hands. And what we would see is, out of 40 people, we probably just get a handful of hands, maybe anywhere from 3 to 5. And that difference right there, that lack of hands in the air, really explains a lot. We don't know many people with disabilities, or we think that we don't. As humans, we're naturally afraid of the unknown, right? Which is why it's important to talk about it like we're doing now. A lot of us are afraid of saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing in front of someone with a disability. And, for example, if a person is blind, should we continue to use words such as look, see, or watch since they can't see? And, the answer is yes, if that's a part of your normal vocabulary. And as long as your normal vocabulary isn't offensive. Because what happens is that person can usually sense that you're editing your words or changing how you talk to address them, which may put them on the defensive. As an example, you may want to say to a blind coworker, did you see the game last night? And what happens is sometimes in the middle of delivering that sentence, you catch yourself and it becomes, did you see, and your face gets red and you get really sweaty. And that right there, it makes the person feel awkward. And it really sends the signal that you don't feel comfortable with them, and you've got to watch your words around them, even though you're just trying to be respectful. So that also leads to significant communication barriers being put up because the person with the disability knows you're not comfortable talking to them. Also, for all you dog lovers out there, I include myself in this group. I've got 2 Australian Shepherd Rescues that keep me up at all hours of the day. I know this is hard, but you cannot pet or distract a guide dog. Obvious reason is the person with the disability relies on that dog heavily. So distracting the animal can potentially lead that person into some very dangerous situations. Kids and people like me sometimes don't understand this and just want to love the animals. So just make sure you let us know that the dog is working and doing a really important job. Also, kind of a common theme, a strange theme, that, once people see or notice that someone has really any type of disability, they tend to talk slower or louder. And, just because someone is blind doesn't mean that they also have a cognitive impairment that would require you to talk like that. Is it possible to have both? Absolutely. But if you're assuming that you need to talk slowly and loudly for all people with disabilities, it is just incredibly disrespectful. But you'd actually be amazed how many people think that that's what's needed. That's how you talk to people with disabilities. So we want you to treat us like you would any other person. And what you're going to do is you're going to adjust your communication style as needed and not go in with those assumptions. That takes us to deaf and hard of hearing. So we'll start with proper terminology to use, mix in some stats. Deaf and hard of hearing are the preferred terms by the community. There's another term out there called hearing impaired. It's pretty common, but it is not a preferred term by the community. So deaf and hard of hearing are the ones that you want to use. Around 15% of adults over the age of 18 in the US, so that's about 38 million people, have some sort of hearing loss. And that shoe doesn't fit every person or situation. So people have varying degrees of hearing loss, and not everyone is going to require that same communication method. So our number one tip here is to react to the individual normally, adjust, and when in doubt, you can simply ask them. That person may be able to hear everything you say, and you may just need to speak a bit louder. They may be able to read your lips as you speak, or they may use a sign language interpreter, or they may even prefer written communication. So most hard of hearing individuals are going to let you know this in advance or pretty much right away, since it is their everyday. However, you can simply ask them. Another really important tip here is if you're interacting with an individual who is deaf and who is using a sign language interpreter, is to make sure and maintain eye contact with the individual who is deaf and not the interpreter. That goes against everything we've been programmed to do. You know, you're supposed to maintain eye contact with the person who is talking to you, right? So the interpreter is actually going to be the one expressing the words, but they're going to be the words of the individual who is deaf. And so that is just a really big sign of respect that you can show, is to maintain eye contact with that person. Next, we have developmental disabilities. You know, they're conditions that result in impairment in physical, learning, and language and behavior areas. They impact day-to-day functioning. They usually last throughout a person's lifetime. So roughly 6 million Americans have some type of developmental disability. A few examples you see there on your screen: Down syndrome and cerebral palsy. The actress on your right is Jamie Brewer. Her talent has landed her in multiple TV and movie roles. She has Down syndrome, and just another example of how people with disabilities can achieve the highest levels of a career just like everyone else. And the etiquette piece here, a great rule of thumb is to speak and interact normally and then react to the individual. You know, if the person has an intellectual disability or a developmental disability, you know, maybe Down syndrome, we already told you that a lot of times people are just going to automatically react by talking slowly and loudly, and they just assume that that's standard protocol, that's what's needed. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But if we're assuming that for every single person up front, it's just a way that you're going to personally insult every person that you interact with. So what are you going to do? You're just going to adapt your conversation to the individual like you already do. Start normally, and you're going to pick up on vocal cues. You're going to pick up on body language. If talking slower or louder is needed, then you can certainly do so. Just don't lead with it. Also, don't assume that we're not capable. We do see this a lot of the time with job interviews. You know, people with disabilities, especially if they're noticeable, often get counted out of that process before they get a chance to even begin an interview. And we like to think that that doesn't happen, but you know, it happens all the time. Books still get judged by the cover, and we encourage you to make a point to give everyone a fair shot and not make those assumptions. And you know, there's a stat out there. They did a study where the hiring manager typically decides in that first 20 to 30 seconds of an interaction whether they want to move forward with an individual. And you know, for someone with an intellectual disability or autism, that's statistically the worst part of their interview, as they're getting familiar with their surroundings, familiar with, you know, the setting. And so, you know, we encourage it. How hard is it to move past the first 20 to 30 seconds before you reserve judgment? And, you know, in interviews, sometimes a person with a cognitive disability may not answer the interview question immediately after the question has ended. They may take a few seconds longer to respond. And sometimes that interviewer thinks that they haven't been heard, so they'll repeat that question, sometimes impatiently. And really, for someone with that type of disability, it throws off their thinking and their thought process and sends their interview into a downward spiral that it didn't need to go down. And our final point here is to treat each person age appropriately. So this one boils down to being yourself, talking normally until you need to adapt. An example of what not to do would be, you know, coming up to a 50-year-old man or woman and talking to them as if they were a 4-year-old child. I can assure you that will not get you in their good graces.
All right, Keith. So next we have autism spectrum disorder, or ASD. It's a developmental disability that can cause significant issues with social, communication, behavioral challenges. And there's often nothing about how people with ASD look that sets them apart from people, but people with ASD just may communicate, interact, they may behave, and just really learn in different ways from other people. The learning, thinking, and problem-solving abilities of people with ASD could range from really gifted to severely challenged. Some people with ASD need a lot of help with their daily lives. Others need less or none at all. So if we look at some of the behaviors, again, this covers autistic disorder, pervasive development disorder, and Asperger's syndrome. Some things you might see, the more significant is that hand flapping or rocking back and forth. Those are really coping mechanisms for those individuals. You want to definitely ignore and do not stare at them. Do not touch without warning. One thing often about people with disabilities, they can also hear you speak about them. So, just because they might not seem like they can, they can definitely hear what you're saying. So we want to make sure you're talking to them, not talking about them or around them. Communication difficulties are very common. They can make unexpected blunt statements or comments, very literal. Also limited eye contact. When we're talking about employment, we work with individuals with autism. We make sure they're looking at your forehead in job interviews and stuff like that to make sure they're looking like they're making that eye contact, because it could be difficult. And they say every case of autism is different, but if you listen to our presentation, no matter what the disability is, or not disability or no disability, everyone's a little different. You want to treat them as such, because everyone's got different likes and dislikes. But they say every case of autism is different. You meet someone with autism, you've met someone with autism, not everyone with autism. Keith, throw it back to you. Actually, one second. I'm sorry. I've got Dan Aykroyd on there. So Dan Aykroyd, if you didn't know, he was diagnosed with Asperger's, and he came out with it in 2014. And he said his disability really helped him with making both Blues Brothers and Ghostbusters. I'm a huge Ghostbusters fan over here. So he got another thing about autism is these individuals can get very focused on a topic and just like really, really concentrate on that topic alone. So they become really immersed in it. For Blues Brothers and Ghostbusters, he read all these books about detective work and ghosts, and just everything he can get him. Everything he can get his hands on to learn more about these two things, he did, and it really helped him make Blues Brothers and Ghostbusters, which is a great world we live in to have that. Keith, back to you.
Thank you, Kevin. So that brings us to hidden disabilities, and we brought that statistic out earlier in the training that of all the disabilities out there, 70% are hidden or not readily noticeable. And those include mental illnesses as well. And, I just want to highlight that these are really the only disabilities where we blame the person. How many times has someone with anxiety heard, why are you so stressed? Calm down. Or somebody with depression, cheer up, suck it up. Why are you so sad? Right. And what we're doing when we say things like that, and hopefully you don't say things like that, is we're blaming the person for their disability. And, an equivalent to that is, can you imagine saying something to somebody with cerebral palsy who's walking with a walker and telling them that they're not going fast enough? And that's very similar to what we're doing. We're blaming the person for their disability, and that's entirely unfair. And, going with those hidden disabilities, oftentimes you're going to have absolutely no idea the person has a disability or a mental illness. They could be your best friend, a coworker, somebody pass on the street. And we've already told you a few examples of those, but on your left-hand side of the screen, you can see a bit more. Major depression, generalized anxiety, PTSD, bipolar disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder are just a few examples of hidden disabilities. And an etiquette piece here is that we mentioned that many mental illnesses fit in that hidden disability category, right? So you're going to cross paths in your daily life with many people who have a hidden mental illness. It's just going to happen. All of us have probably heard this expression in one manner or another, geez, did you take your meds today? We've heard it in the workplace and restaurants. It's kind of another way of, asking the person to calm down or what's wrong. But what we don't realize is that that's one of the worst things that you could possibly say to someone with a mental illness. It may seem, a casual joking around comment, but it can put that person on edge and make them uncomfortable, especially if the mental illness is hidden and undisclosed, and, potentially if you're in the workplace as well, because that person is just immediately asking themselves a series of questions internally. How do they know that I take meds? Do they know about my diagnosis? Are they going to tell others? Does everybody in the office or the plant know that I have, this condition or that I take these medications? So I would challenge you just to completely delete that phrase from your vocabulary. There's a lot of different ways that you can express those sentiments, so I'll encourage you to use one of those. Final point here is the golden rule works here as it does everywhere else. So treat everyone the same as you would like to be treated, regardless of whether they have a disability or not. Kevin?
All right, we got two more, and then we're going to some case studies here. So let's talk about learning disabilities. It is a subcategory of hidden disabilities. Learning disabilities are neurologically based processing problems, and these processing problems really interfere with learning some of those basic skills that we take for granted, such as reading, writing, and or math. They can also interfere with some of those higher level skills, such as organization, long and short-term memory, and attention as well. And contrary to popular belief, learning disabilities don't go away. Basically, the brain still works differently as these individuals becomes adults, and they learn many different skills and ways of getting around these difficulties. Adults with learning disabilities who find a career where they can use their strengths and get around these difficulties can be very successful. We have Tom Cruise up there. Tom Cruise has dyslexia. And he learned how to focus his attention. He became a very visual learner and learned how to create mental images and really to order to comprehend what he just read. I kind of relate dyslexia to reading a book on the beach. You go through a couple pages and you're in the zone and you forget what you just read, so you have to go back and read it over again. Kind of like that. Obviously, it's a little different for everyone, but that's kind of a good comparison. Tom Cruise actually, he became a very successful actor. He would go into a casting call as a young actor, and they would give him a cold read. They give him a script, and then he'd have to learn the lines and read it right there, which was very difficult for him. So what he did was he started asking the casting director a lot of questions and gaining a lot of intel. What's the relationship with the character? What happened in the scene prior? What happened after? So on and so forth. Gaining this intel, he was able to ad-lib some of his lines, with the lines on the paper, but ad-libbing a lot and really impressed the casting director, became very successful. To this day, he rewrites some scripts for his movies, and he has someone to help him out with that. He has scripts read aloud to him, and he just, again, finds ways to get around that disability to become very, very successful. All right, and the last one is medical disabilities. And these are usually required during your lifetime, not something that you're typically born with. And contrary to what most people think, you can acquire a disability in life, even if you didn't have one before. We have a lot of baby boomers aging into disabilities nowadays. The few common examples are traumatic brain injury, TBIs, strokes, and a few that actually surprise people are diabetes and cancer or cancer survivor. If you go back to that definition in the beginning, cancer survivor is actually a record of a disability, so that's okay to check the box that you had a disability. And cancer definitely makes an impact on some of your one or two of your life activities. So cancer and cancer survivor definitely fit into that category. And if you know someone who has diabetes, you definitely are aware of how they are very dependent on those shots during the different times during the day, and they also can experience some episodes that definitely affect their daily lives. We have Tom Hanks up here. He announced in 2013 that he has type 2 diabetes. And again, diabetes, cancer survivor fall under that medical disability. And one thing that Keith has pointed out to me, stats show that you can join this, you can join this group at any time, but every person on this training actually are more likely to acquire a disability by the age of 65 than you are actually passing away. So again, a lot of individuals are aging into disabilities, and with technology and new medicine, we're able to perform as the way we could before that. All right, so let's talk a little bit about case studies here. I think we got a few minutes to go through this. And we want to go through these case studies and these videos to really not show you the great work that we done and brag about it, but we really want to really inspire you that it could be done. Again, when we talk with employers, they say people with disabilities can't do our jobs, or we don't hire people with disabilities. These two companies have done it and done it right, along with the other employer partners that we work with, and are really proving the case that people with disabilities can do any other job than anyone without a disability. So right now, Pepsi Acts is our partnership with Pepsi Beverages. Stands for Achieving Change Together. We're actually over 2,200 hires. We launched in 9 of their sites in 4 years, then expanded to all sites in 2019. We got a visit from the former Secretary of Labor, Tom Perez, who's the picture on the top right. And the individuals down there are two individuals who work for Pepsi Beverages with invisible disabilities, right? Can't tell that they have some kind of disability there. Again, we hired from the warehouse to department managers. We worked in warehouses, call centers, technical facilities, and we received some wonderful recognition from the Department of Labor, the OFCCP, as our OFCCP, and national and local recognition as well. So I'm going to show you a quick video here. This is going to highlight some of those individuals with disabilities working for PepsiCo, so all of their brands. And it's also a video that encourages employees with disabilities to go ahead and check, yes, I have a disability, and be proud to be a part of PepsiCo now that they know that they belong there.
Been with PepsiCo for coming up on 5 years now. Work on the fountain line, do everything from side graphics, new valves, new lines, hoses, make it the beautiful machines that you guys see when you go have dinner at night with your family.
I'm an administrator, and I make sure the building runs, pay all the bills and everything like that. I've been here 22 years. I'm on the downward fall now. I'm going towards the 40 years.
I've been with Frito-Lay for about 13 years. I'm a pre-pick picker, and I basically work on the module. You have to be quick. You have so many bags you need to pick. You have lots of orders, and you need to make sure you get them all.
A normal day for me is I go out there on the floor, see how my guys are doing, see how everything's going, and make sure my guys have their work orders and they know what they're doing for the day.
I am an HR specialist, and so what I do is I design surveys to really get at what our business leaders want to know about our employees and how they're feeling.
I've been with PepsiCo almost 9 years, and I am currently in supply chain finance, supporting the warehouse function.
I'm the senior market director in the state of Indiana. Been with the company for 34 years.
I have a disability called achromatopsia. I'm considered blind. I'm really susceptible to light. I can't see very well in light either.
Is this bothering you at all?
Yes, it is, but it's fine. I can't even see your face.
Sensor, neural, hearing loss.
I have multiple sclerosis.
Traumatic brain injury.
I'm a type 1 diabetic.
Our son has Angelman syndrome.
I'm a mother of a child with dyslexia. What they're looking at may not be what they think that they see, that there's something that goes on underneath all of our skins.
You saying hi to you. He likes you.
Some of the challenge is the unknown. The atypical days are the days when he has seizure episodes. That's a horrible situation for any family to deal with or person to deal with, because it's really the edge of death.
I found out that I had my disability when I was 5. My mom sat me down. She said, I want to let you know that you have a disease called achromatopsia. You can't see, you're blind, and you can't see color. I told her, no, you're wrong. And she told me, well, what color is this? And slides me over a toy. I told her it's green. No, it's not, Candace, it's not green.
I don't have the coordination or the balance. It's more of a neurological disease, like an extension cord plugs into the wall, which would be my brain. The cord might be frayed, and you won't get a great connection. My connection doesn't go towards my body.
I was about 6 or 7 years old when I came down with scarlet fever. I've lost approximately about 50% of my hearing. At this point, I'm down to maybe like 30% of my hearing.
I was in 2nd grade, and I started to cry during a math test because I could no longer see the numbers on the page. They were blurry. And that was because my blood sugar was so high that it began to put pressure on my optic nerves, and so it was messing with my vision. Sometimes having a disability, especially an invisible disability, you can sort of feel isolated and like no one knows what you're going through every day.
In 2002, I joined the military. And during one of my deployments while I was in the Army, I was injured, got hit in the head. My back is in all kinds of shambles, and I do have PTSD from that incident.
The support that we have received from PepsiCo is vast and comprehensive.
When I first applied for this role with PepsiCo, first thing out of my mouth was, I said, are you sure that you want to put a territory in the hands of someone I cannot pick up a phone and put a fire out like that. And my boss says, we'll make it work. We'll figure it out.
They're going to help you. You need things printed bigger, you need things signed to, whatever it may be that you need, it's going to be there for you. And no one's going to hold it against you if you need a little bit of help.
Disabled employees and caregivers are welcome and are vital to our business and future growth. Self-identification is important so the company knows how well we're serving our associates with disabilities. 1 in 5 working-age Americans has a condition that qualifies as a disability. Disability reaches all ages, all races, and your gender doesn't matter. The term disability includes a vast array of conditions. 70% or more are hidden disabilities, meaning these conditions are not visible to others.
I would say absolutely self-identify. There's absolutely no reason for you not to. I acknowledge my disability as part of who I am.
A little bit of a weight was lifted the day that I did tell my manager for the first time. It was great to feel like she knew who I was as an employee.
Make sure that there's very open dialogue and transparency.
Let them know that, even though you do have a disability, you still can be productive and you can be part of the team and help get things done from day to day.
Associates with disabilities, like any of our associates, are integral members of our big PepsiCo family. We take pride that diversity is in our DNA. That's the PepsiCo way, and it's how each and every associate is treated.
I love my job.
I mean, I wouldn't want to work anywhere else. They don't treat me any different. They treat me as just Brian.
It's about bringing my full self to work.
It's huge to have a voice. You're the only you.
To all our associates with disabilities and anyone who is a caregiver for a person with a disability, I simply want to say this: you belong here at PepsiCo. You make us a faster, stronger, better company. So please take the time to self-identify through the MyHR system, and we will continue doing everything we can to support you and encourage more people with disabilities to join the PepsiCo team.
All right, throw it over to Keith.
Thank you. We got a second short video for you. And this was a company we work with called Synchrony. They are a bank, and they also are the largest provider of private label credit cards in the U.S., so maybe you get some mail from them. But we really started our project with them in 2016 in Kettering, Ohio. It's since expanded all across the United States and internationally as well, with 700 plus people with disabilities hired. And we want to show you these videos, as Kevin mentioned, to inspire you. We also want to show you what disability employment looks like, because we can talk about it for hours on end with slides, right? But this is seeing it in action. And you'll realize that these people are just like you and me. They're doing the same job, and it just so happens that they have a disability. So we've got a short video for you here that Kevin will play.
The biggest challenge I faced in the past when looking for employment was whether or not they were going to give me a fair shake.
I couldn't get interviews. I couldn't get in the door.
You just could almost see it on the employer's face when I come rolling in. They just all of a sudden, they've already decided she's not going to fit.
People don't tend to give you a chance to prove yourself.
It was so awesome to come here to Synchrony and find out that, they're overlooking that.
Synchrony is a great example of a company that, doesn't pay lip service to an idea.
First and foremost, Synchrony's commitment to ensuring we have a diverse and inclusive culture and body of employees that represent our marketplace. It's not only an altruistic pursuit, we do this because it's good business. A lot of the mistakes I thought we were going to make, we avoided because we were guided by experts. We hired Disability Solutions, and they were really able to shepherd us to engage in the community.
It's companies like Synchrony that provide us, the disability community, with the opportunity to showcase our talent and our values.
And Disability Solutions, they trained me into finding out how to apply myself at a job.
It made me feel like I wasn't alone. made me feel like there's other people out there. It's not just me, not happening to just me.
Keith Meadows, he great coaching. Told me, helped me with the interview process, gave me confidence because he saw that I had an ability, not a disability.
It's a welcoming culture, and they feel that they're being evaluated based on their merits and their abilities, which is huge.
I have a learning disability, so I call it more of a learning ability because I think different than others. So I learn different in different ways. When somebody gives you just a little bit of confidence and even sees, doesn't look at negative parts, but looks at the positive, that's what gives you confidence.
Yeah, they're going to look at you and see, okay, he's in this chair. But if I portray confidence, then maybe not look at me in that manner.
It's been very inspiring, honestly. It's inspired me just seeing the work ethic and the drive, and the type of employees that we're recruiting through this program.
The next phase of our project, I think, will really shift to getting people hired to ensuring that we have an environment where people are growing and getting promoted.
My goal is to go up the ladder and show that I can, that you can be successful.
That even if I get out of this chair, which is my goal, that's my goal, is to get out of this chair. I would like to get out of this chair, but even at that, I think I still, would stay here.
I'm still working here, so I must be doing something right. So
I never would have thought that I would be in a position that I am now. I never even thought that I would be able to make a paycheck again.
So if you're struggling and you get the same, deer in the headlight look every time that you go into an employer, being deaf, blind, wheelchair, or some other sort of disability, here's your chance.
The main thing is never give up on yourself. Whatever job or employment that you want to go for, believe that you can get it. That's the first step.
No matter if you have a disability or not, you still have hope. And you can still accomplish whatever you set your mind to.
All right. So those videos are kind of our mic drop. Q&A, 1 in 4, quick review here, 1 in 4 Americans have some type of disability. Disability limits one or more of life's major activities. The definition is very broad. Again, 30% are visible, making 70% invisible, something to think about. Many different types of disabilities out there as we discuss. And really when it comes to etiquette, just use the golden rule, treat others as you would like to be treated. And more importantly, ask rather than assume when it comes to helping them out. So that said, we'll turn our cameras back on, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Again, any questions you want to ask, feel free, go ahead. We love it.
How about maybe Diane can get started on her presentation, and then if anyone has any questions for all three, Keith, Diane, or Kevin, go ahead and type them in the chat. And we'll get you unmuted so we can do a Q&A. But Diane, for the sake of time, go ahead and get started. And yeah, we'll go from there.
Okay, great. Hi, most of you know me. My name is Diane Campanelli. I actually serve as an HR consultant to a lot of organizations in the Philadelphia and Delaware area. One of those is Thrive, and I actually pulled up one of their papers. So many of you know Joe Rikiki. Joe Rikiki and his daughter, Rosemarie, actually run Thrive. And it sounds from going through this presentation today that much of the work that they do is extremely similar, but as you know, it is local to the Delaware community. So they do in fact go ahead and work with employers who are seeking to expand people within their organization that have disabilities. They are willing to go ahead and work with people who have disabilities who are also seeking positions. They do have job coaches on site to be able to help to do that. So as I was going through this presentation, and with the limited amount that I know about working with the Thrive organization, it sounded very similar. It sounds like it's also probably a little bit of a difference in the size of an organization. I would imagine that what we've just heard is for a larger sized organization, where Thrive has in fact been working with smaller organizations, and most interested in helping people with disabilities get positions rather than employers getting positions for people with disabilities or setting up a program to hire people with disabilities. That's most often what I heard today, Kevin and Keith, was about your side of the fence that also works more with employers in setting up those programs, which I think most of us would like to learn more about and actually work towards. Thrive really takes people with disabilities through some of the contracts that they have, in particular with the state of Delaware, and gets them set up for some of the positions that exist that they have with the state of Delaware. So Emma, you are going to go to make their flyer available to everybody at the end of all of this. So if you have an interest in Thrive, which says real life independence, you can always contact me. I'd be happy to put you in touch with Joe or Kiki, or you can go ahead and use the contact information that's going to be on the flyer that is given to you at the end. So you all know I'm the program chair for Delaware SHRM, and I want to ask the first question, actually. Kevin and Keith, as a person, and almost everybody in Delaware by now knows I have epilepsy. As a person with epilepsy, I can be fidgety. I move around a lot. And usually that's because of a rotation that I constantly have following 3 brain surgeries. Life is good and I'm fine. But I find that employers read these articles that talk about how somebody behaves in an interview and attach that. Don't think about, wait, what if that person actually has a disability that they're not revealing that is exhibiting itself, like fidgeting and changing my position all the time, or even putting my hand on my head on my hand. And I do that largely to stop what I feel as an internal rotation. Do you ever talk to clients about the articles that they are reading and how maybe that could not apply so much with people who have invisible disabilities? You're on mute.
Yes, we actually do a whole presentation on interview skills for employers, because I think even Keith mentioned it with like intellectual disabilities, where they ask a question, interviewer asks a question, and that person might take a little more time to process that question and then answer it. And in that time gap, the interviewer might re-ask the question, and that really just resets the clock again for that individual trying to think of their answer. So yeah, a lot of different, body language things to look out for that we say typically might kind of make you not want to hire someone. We want you to just look a little differently at them. And, these are things that happen with some disabilities. It's not going to affect who they are as a person or as a worker, just might affect how they are in an interview, which is already a very uncomfortable situation, right? So we do a whole presentation on that as well.
Very good. I won't continue to ask questions, although I always can.
Go ahead. I love it. Thanks for sharing your story.
Does anybody else have any questions that they want to go ahead and ask?
Good morning. My name's Jean Tillman. This is my first SHRM webinar, so thank you very much. Hi, Diane. Long time no see. One of the questions I have, I'm a professional communicator. I work for an association in construction. And so there are a lot of the things that you talked about this morning that we're kind of battling in the construction industry. I mean, mental health is one of the biggest issues for people in the construction industry, suicide. So we're doing a lot of campaigns around wellness and suicide prevention and mental health understanding. But I guess one of my questions after looking at this presentation, which was absolutely outstanding, I learned so much this morning, is how do we as people who are interviewing or people who are working with the interviewers ask a question without upsetting a person who has a disability, or if we ask the question and they become defensive about it. I have worked with some people who have disabilities and they are so open, but just as the same amount are open are closed about it. And when you try to ferret that out to be able to say, yeah, we can work with this, they become so upset and not abusive, but just, really kind of put you on the spot. So how do you work with someone like that? How do you work around that so that you're not coming across as one who is going against laws, asking questions that you shouldn't ask.
Yeah, so can you go just a little deeper? So are they bringing their disability up in the interview, or do you believe they have a disability?
So sometimes yes, but based on, you know, the studies that you read and what you had referenced, and, you know, taking looking at the person, listening to the person and how they respond to the question. You know, you can only legally ask certain things, but you also want to understand if that person has a disability, you know, how you might be able to understand it better, and can you accommodate that, and how can you accommodate that? But sometimes people with disabilities just get so offended that you dare to ask that. You know, how do you work through that without doing anything illegal, and yet still wanting the person to understand, I want to understand, I want to help, and I would like to hire you if you fit the job.
Yeah. Yeah. So first of all, I'm not a lawyer, so I will stay very, you know, I want to put that out there. But what we've talked with employers is, you know, and as part of that process is, and again, you got to make sure you run through your counsel, but one of those questions that could be asked, if it's appropriate, is, you know, like, have you ever needed an accommodation, or is there accommodation that can be provided to help you do better your job? And that's kind of a general question. You ask it on any interview, not just when people do you think have a disability or know they have a disability. So we've done that in the past and recommended that, where they can give you know, some kind of feedback, especially when it comes to accommodations. You know, that person knows who they are, they know their disability better than anyone, and they know what's worked for them before. So that's why, you know, when you're asking for accommodation, you really want to make it sorry, I'm lost for words today. Interactive process. You want to make it an interactive process where you're not just saying, hey, this is what we've done for people with your disability before, because every person is different, every disability is different. So it's an interactive process between the employer and the job seeker, and really the manager who's going to be managing the individual as well. So we typically do that. Definitely people do become defensive. Many reasons is being discriminated against. You know, that's why a lot of individuals don't select they have a disability on that paperwork, even though it really doesn't or shouldn't be used against you in an interview or being hired process. It's really just for, you know, compliance. But there's a really lot of fear and stigma around people with disabilities, thinking they're going to be discriminated. So they don't usually check that box, and they want to keep that disability away of anywhere being employed, to kind of, you know, again, not to be used against them. So it's really an interactive process. But if the people sometimes get, you know, intense or mad or angry, that is kind of, I always say, it's a yellow or red flag. That's probably not a good fit for your organization if they're going to get upset with you. But, you know, same thing, everyone's different, and they might get upset. They think you think they have a disability and need some accommodation. So it really, again, depends on the person, individual, and just make sure you're keeping that interactive process for everyone, to see if they need some kind of accommodation to be successful on their job. I wish I had like a black and white answer, but a lot of these things are very gray sometimes. So you got an individual basis as well.
In the construction industry, it's very, very difficult because there's so many physical aspects to it. We have just as many non-physical aspects, but the physical aspects. So there are a lot of questions surrounding this, and how can we do this, and what can we do for people, you know, who want to work in this industry.
Yeah, sometimes the industry is kind of like the old way, right? Things are said, and there's different conversations that happen on a construction site. You know, my brother-in-law, I've heard some really good stories from him. You know, what's said, I'm like, if that happened in my job, I'd be fired. I'll be fired. So it is, especially with the mental health, again, some stigma around mental health. It's probably, you know, tough to have those conversations as well with your coworkers and managers as well. So yeah, it's a tough spot. Keith, you want to add something there? Or you just breathe?
Yeah, I would just say, you know, if, you know, this could be an opportunity to, you know, focus on the culture and, like, you know, have folks aware of what resources that you offer, you know, when somebody comes on board, or whether they're an existing employee. I think you're always going to have in interviews, you know, you're going to have people that volunteer too much information, right? And it's your job as an interviewer to kind of move past that. And, you know, if they offer up a disability, you know, you don't want to go deep on that. You're going to focus on, can this person do the job, right? And then once they are hired, what resources and what culture do you have that kind of funnel them to, the place that they need to be if they're struggling with mental illness or mental health, and who can they reach out to, what resources are available, what phone numbers can they call, is there a team lead who they could talk to. Those types of things I think will be more impactful rather than focusing on specific types of questions, and will help you overall.
Does anybody else have any questions that they'd like to ask at this time?
Good morning, everybody. Excuse me. My name is Denise Burke, and I don't have a question, but I just wanted to make a little announcement. I'm with vocational rehabilitation with the state of Delaware, and I manage our statewide business relations unit. And we provide vocational rehabilitation. We provide services to people with disabilities to increase their education and skills, and then assist them with finding the right job placement and the right match. So if you're looking for qualified candidates and want to diversify your team, please reach out to us and we can provide that person for you. And I'll go ahead. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'll put my email in the chat.
Okay. I think somebody else had a question, had their hand up. Hi, Sunday.
Oh, sorry. I don't know why it appears Sunday. I am Annabella. So hi, I'm a student in Wilmington University. I want to go back on where they talked about the various types of disabilities that they have. So, and it was mentioned that we shouldn't call them like disabled. Like from where I came from, when we see somebody like that has such a disability, we call that situation like crisis. For example, like the asthma situation, where we say generalize it like disabilities, not like disabled or something. We always call it crisis. So I don't know if it's the same thing in United States, like when you're walking somebody with asthma, let's say the situations, she start having issues with the asthma. Do you call it crisis in that situation, or you still call it like a disability? Or if you call crisis, would the person be upset? So which one is the best to use in that situation?
You're saying like crisis, is it like something that's happening, or you call someone with a disability a crisis?
Let's say the person with asthma is gasping for breath. He can't breathe very well, or somebody with epilepsy start having that issue, falling the epilepsy situation.
Yeah.
Like for us, when that person is in that situation and acting like that, we call it like a crisis. That person is having the asthma crisis or the epilepsy crisis. Is it a good word to use to describe somebody?
That's a good one. I think it's okay to use. I mean, again, everyone's different. That's why the person-first language, even the person-first language gets some criticism once in a while, because everyone's different what they prefer. Crisis to me sounds like it's okay, because it seems like a crisis episode, or I would say an episode or something like that. Mm-hmm. But crisis seems good, because if they're trouble breathing or having some kind of seizure, that is kind of a crisis. So I would be okay with that. But again, Diane might not be, so you never know. But I think it's pretty good word. So when we talk about person-first language, it can go to the extreme. But we worked with a company where they drew, it was like a bunch of vans driving people around a park, and they would say, hey, we got a wheelchair, so next bus pick them up. They would be calling people wheelchairs basically. So we want to try to get away from that stuff. It's like, instead of we have a person utilizing a wheelchair, that'd be much better than, hey, we have a chair. They used to call people. So it's really getting away from some of those like terrible terms, and like really thinking of these individuals as people, not just a person with a disability who's I don't know, whatever the fear and stigmas around them. So it's really kind of just putting in nice little better language to it. But crisis, I think, is okay. It is a crisis, right? If someone's not breathing or having some type of episode due to their disability. So I think that's okay.
Okay, thank you.
And I think it would be important to draw this distinction too. Like if they're actually in a crisis and like I have asthma and I can't breathe, that would probably fit the bill. But if I was just like walking down the street and you said, hey, look at that crisis, I would probably do a double take and be like, oh my gosh, I didn't reevaluate my life, right? Like, so you want to be very careful. Person-first language is a really solid terminology to use. And then, you know, the term you're talking about could be used in like specific situations, like if things get bad or, you know, a person needs help. I would probably draw the distinction there between the two.
That's a good point. Go ahead. That's good.
Sorry, Kevin and Keith, you did a great job today. And I know that Emma's going to make your information available to everybody who would like that information, who is here on our call today, but also anybody in the Delaware SHRM community who may be able to take advantage of some of the services that you certainly offer. If those of you who need SHRM credits haven't noticed, on the right-hand side in the chat, Emma went ahead and put in the codes that is needed. There you go. And I wanted to make sure that I did point out to everybody that next month we have Kim Hamill from Apex will be talking about reinventing your culture, and that is on September 8th. So we're looking forward to seeing that program. Kim is awesome. Emma, do you have anything else you want to share besides let's get people to our conference this year?
Yeah, that's it. You know, we do have that webinar in September, and then October is our annual conference. It's a 3-day event. Tickets are on sale now. And as you know, this is our biggest event of the year. You'll be eligible for about 12 continuing education credits for attending. So I encourage you to check out the details on our website and sign up to join us. But otherwise, we will see you next time. Have a great rest of your week. And thanks again to our speakers.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you. That was wonderful.
Thank you.